Excellence in our industry comes from quality teams creating quality products. In an industry that's constantly evolving, it's your unwavering grit, determination, and passion that drives innovation and elevates standards to new heights. As brewers ourselves, we know what that passion looks like. It's the drive to create something exceptional, fueled by dedication and love for the craft. As a stainless steel equipment manufacturer for over 10 years, ABS Commercial provides a full consultative approach to our customers, from consultation and design to installation and ongoing care and maintenance. Whether you're in planning, just getting started, or looking to expand, we're here to support your growth and your success. Thank you for choosing ABS Commercial as your trusted partner.
Wow, what a gorgeous commercial. And now there's me. Welcome to H2O, yeah, water chemistry's role in brewing. So, my name is Frances Tietje-Wang, and I am an owner of Fermly in Denver, Colorado, a third party lab. I'm a TTB certified brewing chemist. I am on ASBC webinar committee. I'm on Master Brewers Association of America's District Rocky Mountain Vice President. DEI and food safety committees, as well as a subject matter expert in the Brewing and Malting Science course on quality. I am also on the Association of Food and Drug Officials Laboratory Science and Technology Committee. I'm a freelance writer. I'm a multiple marathoner because I believe we're in the apocalypse and you need to be in good shape for that. And also, I enjoy making some memes. So let's get into what we're actually going to talk about in this session. So we're going to assess and evaluate water sources and some forms of filtration, identify the roles of those minerals, apply water treatment techniques, calculate and make some water adjustments in a brief little exercise. And we're going to talk about some water profiles from some of the great brewing regions that have produced phenomenal styles that will help you kind of know where you're going and why is it this way. So onwards to the basics of water chemistry. Now, what is water? Seems pretty obvious. Water is a transparent, odorless, and nearly colorless liquid that is, chemically speaking, two hydrogen atoms bonded to an oxygen atom, otherwise known as H2O. It acts as a solvent in which all brewing processes occur, but can vary significantly based on several factors, since it often contains dissolved minerals and impurities. So pH is the measure of the acidity or basicity on a value of scale of 0, very acidic, to 14, very basic, with 7 being neutral. In brewing, the pH of the water affects the mash process and the beer's flavor. You also talk about this a lot with hop water, because if you're producing a hop water, you might want the pH to be closer to the actual fruit that you are trying to be reminiscent of if you are including that. The ideal pH for brewing water is slightly acidic, usually between 5.2 and 5.6. And this particular range supports efficient starch conversion in the mash and yeast health during fermentation. Then we have alkalinity, and that refers to the water's ability to neutralize acids, acting as a buffer to resist changes in pH. It is primarily determined by the bicarbonates present in the water. So high alkalinity can raise the pH of the mash, which can then be problematic with certain styles. And then we have hardness. It's primarily a measure of the concentration of calcium and magnesium ions. Now, there are two types of hardness: temporary and permanent. Temporary is caused by the presence of bicarbonates and can be removed by boiling, whereas permanent is caused by sulfates and chlorides, and those remain after boiling. We also have dissolved gases, and those can be present like oxygen and carbon dioxide. Oxygen has its moments in brewing, but can otherwise cause oxidation and stale flavors. Carbon dioxide can affect the water's pH and must be controlled to prevent pH imbalances while brewing. And then we have organic materials or contaminants. And those are things like algae, bacteria, pesticides, or traces of organic matter that can negatively impact the flavor and stability of the beer. And we have minerals, which affect mash pH, yeast health, and the flavor profile of the beer. In fact, let's talk about a couple of those. So first off, we have calcium. And this is one of the most important minerals in brewing, as it helps lower the mash pH, which is essential for proper enzyme activity during mashing in. It also aids in yeast flocculation, which helps with beer clarity and enhances the stability and shelf life of the beer. It has minimal direct impact on flavor, but can significantly influence that overall beer quality. Then we have magnesium. And magnesium is a secondary nutrient for yeast, supporting fermentation. It also slightly lowers the mash pH, though less effectively than calcium. In higher concentrations, magnesium can impart a slight bitterness. And in small amounts, it has little to no noticeable impact on flavor, but high levels can really contribute to astringency. Then we have sodium, and that can enhance body and sweetness when present in moderate amounts, complementing some malt forward styles. However, too much sodium can result in a salty or metallic taste, and it can add a smooth, rounded flavor to the beer, especially in stouts and porters when balanced well. And sulfates, they help accentuate hop bitterness and dryness, making them particularly beneficial for hoppy styles like IPAs. They promote a crisp, dry finish, enhancing perceived bitterness, and is pretty desirable in hop-forward beers. Then we have chlorides, and they emphasize malt character and fullness, adding to the perceived sweetness and body of the beer. They are ideal for malt-heavy styles like porters, stouts, and some lagers, and they provide that smooth, rounded mouthfeel and can enhance malt sweetness. Then we have bicarbonates, and they contribute to alkalinity, which can raise the mash pH. They are useful in brewing darker beers that naturally have acidic malts and need higher pH buffering. In lighter beers, high bicarbonate levels can result in undesirable flavors and reduced mash efficiency. And high levels can impart a chalky or soapy taste, particularly in those lighter beers. Zinc, although present in trace amounts, zinc is so crucial for yeast health and fermentation efficiency. It helps enzymes function properly and contributes to overall yeast vitality. Brewers often supplement zinc during fermentation. I always recommend that you should really check your zinc when you're talking about retaining haze in your IPAs. Minimal impact on flavor when in trace amounts, but it is really important for supporting that fermentation and consistency. Then we have iron, which is generally unwanted as it can lead to metallic flavors and oxidation, but small amounts of iron can be present in some water sources. So you should really consider filtering it out due to those adverse effects on flavor and beer stability. And it can impart some metallic rusty flavors even at low levels. So it's pretty undesirable. And then we have chlorine and chloramine. And sorry, my computer just freaked out. And those are often present due to water treatment processes. Chlorine and chloramine can lead to off flavors if not removed. They can react with phenols from hops or malt to create chlorophenols, which have a medicinal or plastic-like taste. And so that's when you get those really fun medicinal or chemical flavors if it's not removed prior to brewing. And so we already went over iron. But let's talk about some of the other ones that are here. Manganese, like iron, manganese can impart that metallic off flavor and contribute to haze formation. It can also cause staining in brewing equipment and impact yeast health at higher concentrations. You should definitely make sure that you're keeping that below 0.05 ppms to avoid taste and stability issues. Then we have copper, and although trace amounts are essential for yeast health, higher concentrations of copper can be toxic to yeast and lead to unpleasant metallic flavors. Copper also promotes oxidation, which can result in stale flavors. So it should really be kept below 0.1 parts per million. Copper contamination can often be managed with filtration or by avoiding the use of copper fittings in pipes. Aluminum can contribute to metallic or astringent off flavors in beer. In large amounts, it may also have negative health impacts. Most brewing grade equipment avoids aluminum, but water from certain sources may contain trace amounts. And keeping aluminum levels minimal or undetectable is recommended. I also would encourage you to really make sure of where you're sourcing your equipment from, especially if it's secondhand, because believe me, there has been issues with aluminum being utilized. Then we have lead, and lead is toxic and it poses a lot of serious health risks. Even trace amounts can be harmful. So lead contamination considerations is super critical. Your water should be tested for lead, especially if it's sourced from older pipes or infrastructure, and lead should be entirely absent in brewing water. Here in Denver, we actually had a situation where they increased the pH of a bunch of the municipal water because we do have lead pipes and they didn't want to have another issue of Flint, Michigan. So, you kind of don't know what's going to be happening necessarily on the municipality side. So you really want to make sure that you're taking that initiative and checking for yourself. Nitrates and nitrites. They can cause health issues and they can contribute to off flavors. Nitrites, in particular, can form compounds that are hazardous when ingested. And these ions should be kept to a minimum, ideally below 10 ppm. Sources of contamination include agricultural runoff and septic systems. And so testing and treatment is essential if nitrate levels are elevated. And it killed most of my fish when I was growing up. So fluoride. While fluoride is added to many municipal water supplies for dental health, it can contribute to off flavors if present in high concentrations. However, it's usually found in small amounts that are unlikely to impact brewing. But, you know, you may still want to check them, especially if you have any knowledge of them getting unusually high at certain points. Then we have sulfur compounds like hydrogen sulfide. And sulfur compounds can produce unpleasant aromas, such as rotten eggs, which negatively affect your beer aroma and flavor. They're not usually present in significant quantities in brewing water, but they may arise from bacterial contamination. So you really want to proper water test and filtration for those. And then microbes. Microbial contamination can lead to spoilage, off flavors, including sour or unpleasant aromas. Certain bacteria, such as coliforms, pose health risks, while wild yeast can cause unintended fermentation flavors. I really think that more people need to consider microbes when it comes to water in general, especially if you're considering using any of the water for producing hop waters and things like that, because you sometimes need to double check those cleaning processes to make sure that we're not having something happen later down the line. Microbial contamination can be addressed with UV treatment, boiling, or chemical sanitizers. Most municipal water supplies already kind of control microbial content, but you may want to consider if you're using well or surface water, and we'll cover that more in water sources. Then we have organic contaminants, and organic compounds from agricultural runoff, pesticides, or decaying matter can lead to off flavors and potential health concerns. They can also lead to unintended chemical reactions during brewing. And so it's really important to remove those, like using a carbon filter and doing regular testing. Part of the picture that was of me earlier was actually myself with my father doing water testing as a result of surface runoff and how that had impacted one of our local ponds and resulting in a complete change in the ecosystem. So super fun stuff. This is super close to my heart. I love it. So water sources. We have our municipal tap water. And municipal water is the most accessible and the most commonly used source for professional brewers. It often contains a stable mineral content, but it can vary widely depending on the city's water treatment processes and their natural water source. Here in Denver, we have 3 different reservoirs. You don't know where you're getting your water from. It could be an adventure. And it typically contains chlorine or chloramine for disinfection. And that can impart undesirable chemical or medicinal flavors. So you really need to filter those out and treat with chemicals, and may need to adjust the mineral content depending on the desired beer style. Then we have well water. Well water is drawn from underground sources and often contains high levels of minerals like calcium, magnesium, and bicarbonates. The mineral content can be advantageous for certain beer styles that benefit from higher hardness and alkalinity, such as stouts and porters. But it can vary greatly based off of your local geology, and it may contain contaminants like iron, manganese, or even organic matter. And well water also will require some pretty decent testing just to ensure that it's consistent and safe. We have spring water, and that's naturally filtered as it flows through underground rock layers, giving it a unique mineral profile. It is often considered a high-quality water source for brewing, as it usually contains a balanced mineral content that can suit a variety of beer styles. But that mineral content is not standardized, meaning brewers really should be testing it regularly to make sure that it is meeting the needs of that style. And availability and cost can be factors, because if you're not near a spring source, then it's probably going to take a bit for it to get to you. Then we have reverse osmosis water, and that's when you have water already undergoing filtration to remove nearly all dissolved minerals and impurities, creating a blank slate. And some places have this in their communities. It varies a lot. And then we have lake or river surface water, and some places have access to surface water, which can be really rich in natural minerals, but seasonal changes and rainfall can influence that, potentially offering unique local characteristics. And So, but you need to consider agricultural runoff, organic material, and microbial life, and requires extensive testing and possible treatment to ensure it meets brewing standards, making it less consistent for making it less ideal for consistent brewing unless reliable purification systems are in place. And then we have rainwater, and I've only seen this a few times, but it's very soft. It contains little to no minerals, which can be advantageous for a delicate beer style that requires low mineral content. But it also is really super impacted by those local environmental factors and may pick up airborne pollutants. So you really need to consider, where are you getting your water from, and what's going to need to happen with it. And of course, factors that need to be considered: seasonal variability, the mineral content and overall quality of some of these water sources, particularly surface water, and even some municipal supplies. I know out here in Denver, we have a lot to do with snow melt, can fluctuate with the seasons. Rainfall, drought, seasonal factors can introduce varying levels of those minerals and organic matter and contaminants. Brewers should also monitor that water quality throughout the year and adjust their treatment and brewing processes as needed to accommodate those changes. Then we have our source stability and consistency. And the consistency of the water source over time is really crucial for maintaining the same beer quality across batches. Municipal water sources may change the treatment process or water supply without notice, affecting your pH, your mineral levels, and other parameters, like we were talking about with fluoride and lead pipes and changing that pH. So regular testing is really essential for all of those sources, and that will help you maintain better consistency, avoiding unexpected flavor changes. And then we have to consider availability and supply security. For breweries that rely on sources like well water or rainwater, availability can be affected by environmental factors or even regulatory restrictions. Droughts can lower groundwater levels, and water usage caps may apply during dry seasons or in certain regions. So it's really important to make sure that you have a reliable water source as a backup plan if that supply becomes limited. So diversifying water sources or having the ability to switch to other sources can help ensure that production continues. Then we have environmental and local regulations. So water usage is often subject to local regulations, which may include restrictions on water extraction, disposal, and treatment. For instance, wells may require permits, and wastewater disposal may be regulated based on mineral or pH levels. Understanding local regulations around water usage and wastewater treatment is really essential for this kind of compliance. And this may also affect decisions about water treatment systems and the choice of those water sources. Then we have our sustainability and environmental impact. Because I need water. Some water sources, like large-scale surface or well water extraction, can have environmental consequences. Breweries increasingly need to consider sustainable practices, including reducing water waste, recycling, and minimizing their impact on local ecosystems. Choosing a water source that aligns with sustainable practices, such as utilizing rainwater or investing in water recycling technologies, can really benefit the environment and also really support that brewery branding. You got a marketing opportunity there. So, then we have our water source treatment compatibility. Different water sources may require distinct treatment methods. For example, well water with high iron content might need specialized filtration, while municipal water might only require chlorine removal. So you really need to evaluate the compatibility of your chosen water source with their existing water treatment capacity and capabilities, and also your budget for what you want to do in your brewery to achieve the beers that you want. Then we have those cost implications. Sourcing and treating water can incur significant costs, especially if extensive filtration or mineral adjustments are needed. RO systems can be a pretty substantial investment and require ongoing maintenance. So assess those long-term costs associated with each of those water sources. And then we have to consider the impact on equipment and maintenance. High levels of certain minerals, such as calcium and bicarbonates, can lead to scaling and deposits in brewing equipment, potentially increasing maintenance requirements and affecting equipment lifespans. So you need to consider how that water conditioning is going to mitigate mineral buildup, and may need to adjust cleaning and maintenance schedules based on the characteristics of the water source. And then we have forms of filtration. Now, I'm not going to go really off on a tangent, but water filtration works by removing impurities, contaminants, and unwanted substances from water to improve its quality and make it suitable for brewing. And so there's a couple of different methods targeted for different situations. It can be tailored. You can use one, you can use multiple. They target different impurities. And so if you really want to cover all of your bases, you can use a couple of different ones, especially if you can afford it in your budget and you understand the investment that you're making in the quality of your product. So there's a couple of types of filtration. Carbon filtration, which is activated carbon. It filters it using porous carbon particles to adsorb and trap organic compounds, chlorine, chloramine, and some volatile organic compounds from the water. The large surface area of activated carbon effectively captures these contaminants as water passes through the filter. So it's removing some things that can actually cause off flavors, which is actually pretty good and will improve the overall taste and odor of the water. We discussed RO filtration. It uses a semi-permeable membrane to remove a wide range of dissolved solids and impurities, including minerals, salts, bacteria, and heavy metals. Water is forced through the membrane at high pressure, leaving contaminants behind and resulting in nearly pure water. But it also is very low mineral content. And that allows brewers to customize the water profile from scratch by adding back specific minerals to suit different beer styles. As you'll notice, it's easier to build up rather than take things away, especially after filtration. Sediment filters, they remove large particles like sand, silt, dirt, and rust from the water. And these filters typically consist of a fine mesh or fibrous material that traps these particulates as water flows through. It prevents clogging and wear on other filtration systems and brewing equipment, ensuring the water is free from visible impurities. And that depends heavily on your water source. We also have ultraviolet filtration, and that uses ultraviolet light to kill or inactivate microorganisms, including bacteria, viruses, algae, by damaging their DNA. As water passes through a UV chamber, it is exposed to UV rays, which neutralize those pathogens. And this is a great way to have microbial control without chemicals. And it ensures the water is free from biological contaminants that could affect fermentation or spoil the beer. And it also can be pretty affordable. Ion exchange filters use resins to remove specific ions from the water, such as calcium and magnesium, which contribute to the water hardness. In a typical ion exchange process, hard minerals are replaced with sodium or potassium ions. So it reduces the hardness in the water, which can prevent scaling in brewing equipment. But in some cases, ion exchange can also be used to soften the water, which may be necessary for from some beer styles. Then we have distillation, which I see used more as we need distilled water for a particular project, not that we brew with it, but it's still an important aspect of filtration, which is why I'm covering it. Distillation involves boiling water to create steam and then condensing that steam back into liquid form, leaving most impurities, minerals, and contaminants behind. This process removes nearly all dissolved solids, and it produces very pure water with no mineral content. However, distillation is just really not used very much. Then we have mechanical filtration. And those use a physical barrier, such as mesh or a fine membrane, to block particles above a certain size from passing through. These filters can be rated in microns, indicating the size of the particles they can remove. And it's great for getting rid of suspended solids and fine particles, which can help clarify the water and protect other filtration systems from clogging. Now, before and after filtration, before, your water might contain impurities like organic matter, may include chlorine, chloramine, or heavy metals like iron and manganese, potential for high mineral content, possible presence of microbes or bacteria. And then after, sediment and particles are removed, chlorine and chloramine are reduced or eliminated. And then heavy metals and excess minerals are adjusted. Microbial content is hopefully minimized, and water quality is optimized for consistent taste and reliable brewing results. So let's talk about water treatment. And I'm going to have another sip. So we talked about carbon filtration, and that removes the chlorine and chloramine, which can impart off flavors and react with phenols. So water passes through the activated carbon filter, absorbing that chlorine and chloramine and some organic compounds, making it taste cleaner and less chemically altered in this pre-brewing treatment. There's reverse osmosis, which we discussed as removing nearly all dissolved solids and impurities, creating a neutral base that brewers can customize. Then we have sediment filtration. We have water softening with that ion exchange. But then I really love diving into this, which we haven't really talked about, boiling and decanting. So what the boiling does is it precipitates out the bicarbonates and temporary hardness, which can raise mash pH and lead to undesirable flavors in the beer. So the water is boiled, they precipitate out, They are then removed by decanting the water after it cools. And this technique works best for water with temporary hardness. Then we have acid adjustments, which lower the alkalinity by neutralizing bicarbonates, which helps achieve the target pH range for the mash. It's done by adding small amounts of acids like phosphoric, lactic, or hydrochloric acid that are added to the water to adjust the pH before mashing. And brewers may test the pH and add acids incrementally to reach the desired level. And then again, we have ultraviolet treatment, and that's just killing them bacteria, viruses, and other microorganisms without chemicals. Then we have our in the midst brewing treatments, and we can do mineral additions like salts, and those adjust the water chemistry to match the desired profile for the specific beer style, influencing flavor and mouthfeel. That might be gypsum, calcium sulfate, calcium chloride, Epsom salts, otherwise known as magnesium sulfate, or baking soda, sodium bicarbonate, directly to the brewing water. And these minerals impact mash pH, hardness, and flavor, allowing brewers to create profiles suited for various styles like IPAs or stouts or beyond. And then we have pH adjustments, and that ensures that the mash pH falls within the optimal range, usually between 5.2 and 5.6, for enzymatic activity, maximizing starch conversion and promoting that yeast health. And brewers may add acids or bases to the mash water or wort to fine-tune these pH levels. This can be monitored with the pH meters or pH papers. There's decoction mashing, which is traditionally used to enhance flavor and control mash pH naturally, particularly in continental European styles. And this is done with a portion of the mash being boiled and then returned to the main mash, which raises the temperature and can help lower the mash pH due to increased acidity from malt. And then my favorite little inside joke with several people is about acidulated malt. It lowers the mash pH in a more natural way by adding malt that has been treated with lactic acid. Brewers add a specific percentage of acidulated malt to the grain bill during the mash, and this malt has an acid profile that helps reduce the pH without the need for direct acid additions. If you want to meet somebody that is purely chaotic, if they ask them if they chew malt, if they say acidulated, you got a problem, you got a crazy person, you need to deal with that. So, calculating and making adjustments. Let's start off with talking about water reports. Now, your municipal water supplier reports are regularly done and often available online or upon request. They typically include information on mineral content, pH, chlorine, chloramine, and other common additives or contaminants. These are often free and they give a good baseline of local water composition, but they may not report on everything of interest to brewers or reflect seasonal changes, pipe variations, etc. Because frankly, you can see a difference in the water quality between like breweries on like 2 blocks away because of the differences in pipes and where they are in the systems and what they are receiving. And also those seasonal variations, you're not going to be necessarily getting a report every single time there is going to be a gigantic snowfall or a huge rain or after a drought. So then we also have the local environmental or health departments. Some places have these, provide water testing services to residents, particularly for well water or areas without municipal water. These are often low cost or free, and they're informing on health-related water parameters. So they're more likely to be focused on safety and may not cover all the minerals of interest to brewing. Testing kits are available, and that may include a variety of strips, drops, or meters to measure pH, hardness, alkalinity, and possibly some minerals. The results are immediate and easy to use, but may not be as accurate or comprehensive as other reports, especially for some minerals or contaminants. But it's great for like making minor adjustments or getting a really general idea. Digital meters are great for things like pH and total dissolved solids. More advanced meters can measure individual ions like calcium and magnesium. These are best when combined with other testing methods for a full profile, but they don't replace comprehensive testing. And then you can always reach out to a third-party lab, and they will often provide some sort of water testing tailored to a brewer's needs. A detailed report will include minerals and ions of interest. The service is great, but it can be costly depending on the lab and can take days to weeks for results, but is invaluable for a comprehensive understanding of water. I know of several, I do it, Oregon Brew Lab does it, Ward Labs. There's so many different people that are in this industry that are always willing to help you out with understanding your water better. So let's talk about some steps for making adjustments, because we can do this by analyzing the source water profile, determining the target water profile, calculate the required mineral additions, adjust alkalinity and pH, make adjustments during brewing, and then test and fine tune. So let's go through and just do a fun little project in understanding this a little bit better. So let's talk about what we're going to do here. I'm giving you the target water profile, which has 120 parts per million of calcium, 10 parts per million magnesium, 20 parts per million sodium, 250 parts per million sulfate, 50 parts per million of chloride, and then 50 parts per million of bicarbonate. That's the profile that we want to have. But what we're starting out with is calcium at 40 parts per million, magnesium at 5 parts per million, sodium at 10 parts per million, sulfate at 40 parts per million, chloride at 30 parts per million, bicarbonate at 80 parts per million. So we're going to go through, we're going to do some steps. And so to reach the target profile, adjustments will be made by using brewing salts. And here's how we would calculate the additions. We first need to determine the total water volume. So let's say we're doing a 10-barrel batch. 1 barrel equals 31 gallons total water needed. 10 barrels times 31 gallons equals 310 gallons, or roughly 1,173 liters. For those of you in better countries that understand that the metric system is really important and much more superior to what we use here in the US. Yay. Then we're going to calculate salt additions, and we're going to be using the volume and starting water profile to calculate the amounts of brewing salts needed to reach the target levels. Let's focus on 3 salts commonly used for IPA water adjustments: gypsum, which adds calcium and sulfate; Epsom salt, which adds magnesium and sulfate; and then calcium chloride, which adds calcium and chloride. So using the brewing software, using your brewing software, I'm assuming you have one, or a water adjustment calculator, you can even make a really fancy spreadsheet. You can input the current levels and desired targets, which will give you the precise amounts. Here's a breakdown of the process, though, using rough guidelines. So with gypsum, to increase calcium by 80 parts per million and sulfate by 210 parts per million. This generally requires around 5 grams of gypsum per gallon to raise calcium by approximately 60 parts per million and sulfate by about 147 parts per million. So for 310 gallons, we're going to do some math. You'd need 310 times 5 grams divided by 10 gallons equals 1,550 grams, or 1.55 kilograms. Then we have Epsom salts, and that's to increase the magnesium by 5 parts per million. So typically about 1 gram per gallon increases magnesium by approximately 25 parts per million. So for a small 5 parts per million increase in magnesium, we're going to take 310 gallons times 1 gram divided by 25 parts per million times 5 parts per million, and that will equal roughly 62 grams. And then we have calcium chloride, and this is to increase the chloride by 20 parts per million and provide additional calcium. For chloride, approximately 1 gram per gallon raises chloride by 72 parts per million. So for a smaller 20 parts per million increase, we're going to take that 310 gallons times 1 divided by 72 parts per million times 20 parts per million, and that equals roughly 86 grams. Yay, we did math, but you weren't expecting to do that today. And so then we go into adjusting and adding that to the brewing water. Now measure out the calculated amounts, which was roughly 1.55 kilograms of gypsum, 62 grams of Epsom salts, and 86 grams of calcium chloride. You dissolve the salts into the brewing water, either directly in the hot liquor tank or in smaller portions to avoid overconcentration in one area. And you want to make sure that you stir thoroughly to ensure even distribution. And then you want to test the pH and make adjustments as needed. After adding salts, test the water pH and make acid adjustments if necessary. For IPAs, you may aim for a slightly lower pH, like around 5.2 to 5.4. And you can adjust with food-grade lactic acid if required, or bring the mash pH into the desired range, or like we discussed earlier, possibly use some acidulated malt. Now let's talk about some of the water profiles from great brewing regions and why they're unique. So Burton-on-Trent, England. Now, the characteristics here is that it's high in calcium and sulfate with moderate bicarbonates. It's known for having exceptionally high sulfate levels, up to 800 parts per million. So this high sulfate content emphasizes hop bitterness, making the water perfect for pale ales and IPAs. And some of the signature styles that you see come from there, pale ales, especially Burton Pale Ale and English IPAs. The sulfate enhances the crispness and dryness, accentuating the hop character. Then we have Dublin, Ireland, and water characteristics here are high in bicarbonates with moderate calcium and low sulfate. The water is quite alkaline and hard, which pairs well with darker malts. So the result is the high bicarbonate content helps to balance the acidity of roasted malts, making it ideal for dark beers. And so the signature styles, guess what? Irish Stout and other dark ales, thinking Guinness, the bicarbonates soften the acidity, giving these beers a smoother mouthfeel. Pilsen, Czech Republic. Extremely soft water with very low levels of minerals, particularly calcium, magnesium, and bicarbonates. The softness allows for delicate, nuanced flavors with minimal mineral interference. The softness also enhances malt sweetness without overshadowing it. And this is why we have really great Pilsner lagers. The soft water contributes to this beer's smooth, clean, and slightly sweet profile, allowing the Saaz hops to impart that subtle bitterness. And then we have Munich, Germany, and they have moderately hard water with higher levels of bicarbonates and calcium, but lower sulfate levels. The alkalinity is not as high as Dublin's, but it still influences brewing choices. And so the moderate hardness and that higher bicarbonates complement malt forward styles, like in particular those using darker malts. That's where we get Dunkels, Bocks, Märzen's, Oktoberfest beers. These malty styles really benefit from the water's alkalinity, which balances the darker malt's acidity. Vienna, Austria, moderate levels of calcium and bicarbonates with relatively low sulfate and chloride. It's softer than Munich's water, but harder than Pilsen's. And so the balanced mineral content supports both malt and hop flavors, making it versatile for a range of lager styles. Vienna lagers tend to be the most signature style there. I mean, no surprise. And the balanced profile allows for a toasty, malty beer with that subtle hop bitterness. Then we have Edinburgh, Scotland. Relatively soft water with low sulfate and moderate bicarbonate levels. Contains higher chloride levels, which enhances the malt sweetness. The soft water complements the malty, less hoppy beers as it doesn't emphasize bitterness. So we see a lot of the common styles as Scottish ales, particularly those with malt forward profiles like Scotch ales and wee heavy. The water's mildness accentuates the malt's caramel and toffee flavors. And then Dortmund, Germany, high levels of calcium and sulfates with moderate bicarbonates. It's one of the harder water profiles in Germany. And the water's hardness and sulfate levels support those fuller bodied malty lagers while still accentuating some hop character. Dortmund Export and other strong lagers are some of the signature styles. The mineral content contributes to the robust and balanced beer that combines malt sweetness with a clean hop finish. And then, of course, I had to include this Colorado and our lovely mountain region. We generally have really soft water, which although specifics vary depending on the exact location, the water often contains low to moderate calcium, bicarbonate, and sulfate levels. The softness and clarity allow brewers to adjust the profile easily, making it adaptable for a wide range of beer styles. You would see American Pale Ales and IPAs, which often have custom water adjustments for hop forward flavors. The soft base allows for this really versatile mineral manipulation. And honestly, we have some really great beers that have come out of here. If you consider all the most recent awards given at GABF this past weekend. Then we have San Francisco Bay Area, and the water is moderately soft with low levels of calcium, magnesium, and sulfate, and it makes it relatively neutral and easy to adjust. Versatile for brewing a variety of styles, but brewers often adjust to enhance hop bitterness or malt sweetness as needed. Signature styles like the California Common or Steam beer. The moderate mineral content allows for that balanced profile that can highlight both malt and hops. Then we have Milwaukee. And I mean, who hasn't heard of Milwaukee if you love beer? Moderately hard water with balanced calcium, bicarbonate, and sulfate levels, similar in profile to some European brewing waters, though often with lower sulfates. The balanced profile makes it versatile, slight adjustments necessary for specific styles. American lagers and light pilsners are mostly what's known here. The water's balanced mineral content works well for those easy drinking beers with mild hop and malt flavors. Now, I would be absolutely remiss if I did not touch on sustainability. It's very important. It matters to your community, it matters to your culture, it matters to, frankly, even your marketing, because this is a really important aspect when you're talking to your consumers. Because frankly, it has been proven that customers are more inclined towards breweries that do consider sustainability as a value. Like Pure Project out in California really puts that front and center. So some key considerations: efficient water use and recycling. Implement water-saving practices such as reusing rinse water for non-potable processes. Consider water cycling systems to reduce overall water consumption, especially in areas with limited water resources. Then we want to reduce chemical additives, because minimizing the use of chemicals by optimizing natural water profiles where possible. Choose eco-friendly filtration and treatment methods like carbon filtration over chemical treatments to reduce environmental impact. Then we have responsible wastewater management. Treat and neutralize that wastewater before disposal to reduce contamination and prevent harm to the local ecosystems. Explore anaerobic digestion and other processes to convert wastewater byproducts into biogas or maybe some other reusable resources. We also have local water source protection, where you use local water sources to reduce transportation and energy costs. Engage with local communities and environmental groups to protect the watershed areas and promote sustainable practices. It's a really important thing that we really need to consider, that transportation, pipelines, all of that, it usually goes in through areas of marginalized communities, and they get heavily impacted when those systems break down, cause problems, or if there's a lot of construction. So please consider that when you're looking for where you're sourcing your water from. And then also monitoring and adapting to climate change impacts. Be aware of how climate change may affect water availability and quality over time. Adapt water treatment methods to address seasonal variability and fluctuating mineral content due to climate change. So I've got a couple of tips and tricks that you can use immediately. So evaluate the impact of your chloride to sulfate ratios. Beyond individual mineral levels, consider the ratio of chloride to sulfate to fine-tune the balance between malt sweetness and hop bitterness. A higher chloride to sulfate ratio enhances maltiness, while the opposite emphasizes hops. You can use acidulated malt instead of adding acid for more subtle pH control. And this method can add slight acidity without affecting the water directly, which is perfect for styles that benefit from a malt-derived tang, like certain lagers and wheat beers. Consider sodium levels for mouthfeel. Small additions of sodium via baking soda can improve mouthfeel and add a slight sweetness without saltiness. And this can be especially helpful in full-bodied ales and stouts. Beware of over-mineralization. Adding too many minerals can lead to harsh flavors. Start with minimal adjustments and taste test whenever possible. Simplicity often yields a cleaner, more balanced final product. And be cautious with iron. Even trace amounts of iron can impart metallic flavors and lead to oxidation. If using well water, you should really be considering your iron levels and treatment options if iron is present. Mind the temperature of your added water. Temperature differences can affect mash and sparge efficiencies when diluting with RO or distilled water, so you want to ensure all water additions are at the correct temperature for your brewing step. Adjust your sparge water possibly separately. Consider treating sparge water separately from mash water, particularly for pH. Adjusting the sparge water pH to 5.5 can prevent tannin extraction and harsh flavors in the finished beer. Factor in calcium for your yeast health. Beyond mash pH control, calcium is essential for yeast health, cell wall integrity, and flocculation. Aim for at least 50 parts per million of calcium for reliable fermentation and clearer beer. Monitor the effects of weather on your water supply. If using surface or well water, be mindful of how rain, drought, and other weather patterns can affect mineral content. Sudden shifts may require rapid adjustments to maintain consistency. So this is where it's really important to have those different ways of, where am I getting my reports from? Do we have a test in-house? Do we have a lab that does that we are regularly working with, that we are getting that accountability from? Utilize brewing software for consistency. I love my friends over at Beer 30, but there's plenty of other ones out there on the market. While often used for recipes, brewing software can also track and calculate your water adjustments. And it's a consistent use of these tools that can help standardize water profiles, particularly when adapting to unexpected changes in water quality. So if you're looking for more information and where to get, frankly, more education, there's plenty of it out there. I would heavily encourage you to check out some of these wonderful resources. Of course, I'm going to mention John Palmer's Water. Definitely pick one of these up on from what I understand from everybody else, and my personal preference. This is probably one of the best books in the Elements series, so definitely worth it. I got this one from Thrift Books because I like to support, um, you know, getting books from other places that have already been well loved. And then also Principles of Brewing Science, also an excellent book to get into. I also have linked here a couple of really great articles if you are interested in just exploring a few more interesting things and getting curious. And basically, if you have any questions, you know what? Feel free to reach out to me, francis@fermly.com, or you can follow us along at Fermly No. Yes, you will see some of these memes there. But hopefully, this has been absolutely wonderful for you. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. And other than that, that's all from me. And thank you so much for your time. And I hope you have a wonderful fall virtual conference.